everybody. Welcome to Cullah Cast number 30. We got Emily White here. Emily, really glad to have you here. How you doing?
I'm good. I'm a little tired, but
Yeah,
I'm
me too.
also really glad to be here.
Yeah, it's Friday morning. The last hurrah before weekend. We were just mentioning before I was going camping this weekend. Everyone's got plans. 4th of July is coming up next week. But really excited about this iVoted concert series. So it's not a series, I guess it's an initiative, but it's a series because you've been doing it for a couple of years. Can you just give us a quick skinny about who you are and how you got to iVoted and
Yes, it won't be quick, but it won't be long. So my
perfect.
name's Emily White. I've been in the music industry my entire life. I'm based in Brooklyn, New York. I'm originally from Wisconsin. I run an entertainment firm called Collective Entertainment. I have a new book out called How to Build a Sustainable Music Career and Collect All Revenue Streams. And I'm the founder of iVoted, which is what you asked about. So in 2016, the presidential election was decided in Wisconsin by 22,000 votes and change. It was decided in Michigan by 10,000 votes and change. I also used to tour manage in my younger days, and I had read that voter turnout was down in Milwaukee. And I was like, 22,000 at the time. I was like, that's the Bradley Center. I've obviously changed it to that's the Pfizer Forum. And I thought, why don't we put together some sort of sit concert and tie in voting? And I realized if we took the concept national, we could have that much more impact. So in 2018, we activated over 150 venues in 37 states to let fans in on election night who show a selfie from outside their polling place. A ton of amazing artists played. We had all this organic press that happened. And it was really just myself and an intern. It was an idea that caught fire, and it was great. Obviously, the goal is voter turnout. So now we live in pandemic times, and we are offering artists the option of performing via webcast on election night. Fans can RSVP to access the stream with a selfie at home and their mail-in ballot, or a selfie from outside their polling place. If a fan is not 18 by November 3rd, they can RSVP with a video letting us know what election they will be 18 for and why they're excited to vote. And if you are not from the United States, you can RSVP anyway. So that's what we're doing. And then, instead of just kind of booking artists that we hope people will like or know or think people will like or whatever, we've partnered with Chartmetric, and that's allowed us to look at the top streaming artists in and or from each state. Really, it's really city, but we've been grouping it by state. So we've pitched all of the artists in the Wisconsin and Michigan data sets and announced over 80 artists participating in iVoted so far. We're hoping to finish pitching our Pennsylvania data set. Next week, we'll do our next artist announcement, most likely the Monday after the 4th of July. And then I'm hoping to knock out a state's data set a week and keep doing an announcement every Monday. So although it's under obviously really horrible circumstances, it does appear that iVoted will be the largest music festival of 2020, and all in support of voter turnout. So that's the most succinct version I can give.
no shit? That's pretty awesome. So you and your intern in 2016, you said, was set up 150 venues. That sounds like
in 2018 for the
2018.
midterm elections. Yeah.
Oh, gotcha. That's still a lot of venues.
Yes.
That's a lot of emails.
It is. I'm 37 and have carpal tunnel from it, but it's
Jeez.
worth it.
Yeah, I got one of these balls that I squeeze.
Nice.
It helps slightly. I think I need to get a stronger one. One of those, like, I don't know if you've used those, but they get cramped, man. The hands get cramped. But
Exactly.
that's a really great initiative, and I totally feel that. Hearing especially, yeah, like you said, just not that many people compared to like 20,000. That's just a sliver of Milwaukee, and with enough. And I think I don't know, why do you think people don't vote as much as we'd like to see? I suppose, why has voter turnout been so low?
It's a really I don't have the answer.
Yeah.
I think there's a variety of reasons, but like I posted this last night because like different polls were trending or whatever, just saying that polls don't mean anything. So maybe in 2016, people thought, oh, well, it's obvious Hillary's going to win because that's what everybody's saying. So who cares? My voice and vote doesn't matter. I have no idea.
Yeah,
there's also like election days on a Tuesday normally, which is a huge pain. I remember I went to vote one morning after I worked out early in the morning, and I got there. This is unlike me, but the ballot was really long and I realized I hadn't researched it. So I said to them, can I go home and come back? And they're like, yes, no problem. Well, I was so busy with work that day. I didn't get back till like 8 p.m. And when I walked in, the poll workers were like, we've been waiting for you. We were just about to get rid of your ballot.
Oh, wow.
So I can't even imagine people, I don't have kids. I control my schedule and I still almost missed voting that day. Right. So I think there's just a variety of reasons. And to each their own, but we're looking to change that, obviously.
Yeah, I think if there's the more general awareness and excitement and societal and cultural pressure that is built and put on, I think, the populace. There has been campaigns for a long time. I remember like the Vote or Die or Rock the Vote, all those things. Like lots of different initiatives. But I'm really happy and excited to be part of one that's involving musicians, because I think especially now, maybe not especially now, maybe it's always been like this, but people really kind of look up to musicians and artists and stuff for a lot of their myths and the culture, and like they put a lot of emotional investment into what artists are doing or what people are doing in their community to kind of inspire folks or to connect with folks in different ways. And so I think that's just it seems like a no-brainer that you've been able to do, but at a scale that is pretty impressive. And I think, wait, so how many states then are in this they're using for this year's live stream? Because I would imagine, because it's live stream, there's a downside of there's not the intimacy. There's not that, of course, that show feeling of gathering with everyone. You get that energy of all the people in a room that everyone loves and enjoys. But on the upside, maybe there's more people that can participate online, or maybe it's easier to set up. I don't know. How many folks are there, and do you feel the same way about that, or is it?
I think about it a little differently because I don't know who's going to show up, right? Like election night is pretty wild. But one thing that happened in 2018, I'd love to name these artists, but I probably shouldn't. But two pretty major national acts, one from Wisconsin, if you can figure it out, loved what we were doing, wanted to be involved, but both were on tour in Europe on November 3rd. So what this has done is when there is a widespread vaccine, because we want to do iVoted forever, and obviously we support venues like crazy, we now have this additional webcast option if someone is touring abroad on election night and still wants to participate in iVoted. So we'll see. I mean, it's a pivot, it's an experiment, but it was an experiment in 2018 that worked. We have assembled a slightly bigger team this time, and I'm really proud of the work that we're doing. And all the artists that have come together have been super inspiring. So it's just a true group effort.
Yeah. And I wanted to mention about Chartmetric too, or Chartmetrics, is that what it is? Because I was really interested when you emailed, you're like, oh yeah, we saw some statistics on Spotify about this. And I saw you tweeted about Chartmetrics, or you mentioned it in the email. I forget what it was, but I went and signed up for it, and they were giving some free premium access to people when you sign up. And I was actually blown away at how much data and how comprehensive and how straightforward and how clean and reliable like this site was. And I was able to dig deep into almost all. There was some weird, I wasn't like able to hook up my Apple account or some other things, but I was able to hook up a bunch of different accounts that were some of them were already there. I'm assuming maybe you put them there or someone put them there. I don't know who. Someone did, or maybe it's robots that did. But I was able to go and look through all of some of the data was even years in the past that they had gathered, and I was able to see kind of all the different trends of so much insightful information there. So I mean, I was blown away. I haven't looked back. So they even said that my premium thing was over, so I don't know what it looks like now. But I was very impressed with that. So I think if any musician, I sent it to a few people too because I was just blown away. Any musician who loves data like I do and wants to use that to leverage to try to get some insight into their demographics and their growth or whatever it is on all different platforms. That was super cool. So they're then analyzing all these different states. And how many states did you say that you're planning to do this for? How many data sets of states?
Well, I haven't. I was going to tell my team this later today. So breaking news to them. I'd like to focus on 20. We have some incredible data scientists on our board. And they basically tell us where they think we can have impact. If we do more than 20, it could influence, I might get this wrong, but I think you'll get the idea. If there was like a tie in the Electoral College, the popular vote would be really important. But we're not funded right now. So we're a 100% volunteer team. And so we have to be mindful about resources. Yeah. Initially, I was kind of thinking 10, and then talking to, again, some of the data scientists and political folks on our team, we're going to expand to 20. So that'll be our goal. But I loved what you're saying about Chartmetric. I, as a manager, have been pitched on data in every way you can imagine over probably like the last 12 years or so. I mean, I've literally been in meetings where, I'm being pitched and people are like, and you can know artists, fans, astrological signs, which actually, now that I think about it, like you could do some cool stuff with that. But I was just like, what? This is like 2010. Wow. So my point on that is with Chartmetric, and I'm like, it was so awesome to hear you say all that. To me, it's useful data. There's a million data platforms for music, and we test drove a few. But there was a friend or a colleague at the Arena Network. I guess there's a network of arenas because we were going to try to produce big shows. And he's like, Chartmetric is what you need. And that's what we were looking for. And then also I want to add, for any artist that self-releases or has their own label or anything, you actually can have a free premium account. That's a COVID promotion they're doing. So you can keep that going.
Oh, okay. Well, that's good to know. I'm glad. Yeah.
Instead of just like I was initially going to do before we partnered with them, making new email addresses every 2 weeks.
I'm sure they would appreciate that. Yeah. The only other time I had seen metrics or charts like that were in this program Hootsuite, which I use for social media. It's a small aggregator, social media aggregator, but also you can post with different post to different things. I use it for Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter because sometimes it's just madness to go from one to the other, and sometimes you just want it all there. It can go boom, 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 done. It has to be, you still have to tailor make it for each platform and all that stuff, which you're very well aware of. But I purchased a year of like statistical analysis data or stuff, so I could go look through it. And so it started to collect all the data. Every other week it would go down, and I have to like reconnect the accounts and stuff, and it was quite expensive for a whole year. It was like, it was the premium version of it. But this Chartmetric seemed, even buying the premium was less than this, and you get like everything. Where instead of just the few platforms that Hootsuite integrates with. So yeah, that was super super cool. I get to see some interesting things and be like, oh well, I should tour over here now, because or I need to go to Poland. Obviously, shouts out to all the Polish people, and I know I know why that they're there. Because I've been kind of studying some of the things bit by bit, but I have to go from platform to platform and look every single time. And it's easy to have it all there in one. But so you mentioned you grew up in Wisconsin. So how does some farmer's daughter in Wisconsin go and get into the big entertainment industry? How do you do all that? Midwestern.
Well, I'm actually the daughter of swim coaches.
Okay, swim coaches.
Yeah.
Just as Wisconsin.
Yes. So I mean, music was and is my life. This isn't my new book. It's at the end of my new book. But at Thanksgiving one year when I was a kid, teenager probably, we went around and said what we were thankful for. And I said music and my family and my uncles, like in that order. So I've always been ride or die music. I graduated high school in 2000. So I was looking at colleges in the 90s, and I'm obsessed with Britpop. And I was on an Oasis message board in like the late 90s.
Hell yeah.
I can't even imagine what that would have looked like internet wise, but some fan was like, that used to post a lot of stuff, was like, oh, sorry, I haven't been around. I've been applying to colleges, and I got into Northeastern University's music industry program. And I was like, I don't know what that is, but that's my major.
Yeah.
And I started researching. And at the time I could really only, I mean, I think there probably were historically a few more programs, but all I could find was NYU, Northeastern in Boston. Actually, I found 4, Middle Tennessee State University, and Miami in Florida. Long story short, well, so I'm a swimmer, or I was a swimmer. NYU's Division III, Northeastern's Division I. Middle Tennessee didn't have a swim team. Miami's program was a little more focused on recording than business. So I worked so hard in the pool, just like dreaming of, being able to go to Northeastern. And that's what I did. I mean, I'm from a, middle-class family. It's a private university. I was able to get a swimming scholarship. And
Nice.
Northeastern is also really known for its co-op program, which means alternating semesters, going to school and interning, basically. So yeah, I mean, I was a kid from Wisconsin who I normally say knew no one in the music industry, but technically my parents' really good friends owned Heartland Music, where I grew up. And I just ran into the owner at NAMM because she's on NAMM's board. So shout out to Ellen McDonald, my first industry person. I mean, literally, like when I was an actual little kid, the rule at Summerfest would be, we can do whatever you want all day. We can play on the playground or whatever, as long as you come see music with mom and dad all night. So my parents are huge music fans. And yeah, so like I said, I knew no one when I started. Did a million internships in college. I have another book called Interning 101 that chronicles a lot of that and is also a how-to guide. I think most significantly, I met a band called the Dresden Dolls when I was in college. I started interning for them, doing their merch, tour managing, eventually ended up managing the band. When I graduated, they had taken on management then. They were with a really amazing person and his company, Mike Luba and Madison House. So Mike hired me out of college, and basically I would tour manage the band. I tour managed from age 20 to 23. And then when I wasn't on the road, I would work in the management company, or work at the management company's office in New York. So that's kind of where I got my management chops and my touring and live experience. Yeah, and there's stuff after that, but that's how I got started.
Interesting. So yes, so it's like you were saying, I think right before you mentioned about your book. So this is a book that the newest book you released. It's all about, you mentioned about how you can be a successful musician anywhere, right? By collecting royalties. I'm assuming by leveraging amazing message board platforms and other types of things where you can connect with people online, right? Where you don't, it's a whole new industry, right? As opposed to even 10, 20 years ago, right?
Yeah, literally. I mean, You're a little younger than me. But I'm this weird age where I'm old enough to remember CDs and vinyl and all of that. So I'd like read about an artist in Spin magazine or whatever, have to get in my car, drive down to exclusive company, buy the $17 CD. There was a lot of steps involved. And really, with our digital world now, any artist can record and distribute, which you know better than anyone. And that was not the case in the pre-digital era. So that's completely democratized the music industry. But my new book, I feel that, and it's an Amazon #1 bestseller, so thanks to everyone who's been supporting it. The information in my new book, I feel, is out there, but I've never seen it put in order. From recording to release or creation to execution. And the music industry was set up decades ago in like the 1950s to confuse artists. So for teaching something that was initially set up to be confusing, I feel that would be like trying to teach a kid multiplication and division before you teach addition and subtraction. That would be really hard for the educator, really hard for the student. So yeah, that's why I wrote a whole book on it. You can definitely have a career from anywhere. And pay a lot less in rent than I do, as we were talking about before this.
Yeah, you can live in a van probably.
You could also live in a van, yeah.
Which is still expensive, but no, yeah,
Totally.
that's really interesting. I mean, the whole tour managing and all that, and trying to understand the revenue sources of streaming and stuff. That's something I've been making music for a long time and doing it, just as you described. Like, I am a little younger, but I do remember the time before the internet, and before cell phones. Like, I'm on that cusp. So, like, I think I was 6 or 7 maybe when we had our first dial-up modem or something. But it was really just AOL Kids version, and I had to go to my dad and be like, Dad, give me administrator privileges. This is bullshit. Like,
amazing.
And he's like, oh, I didn't even know that. He's not paying attention to it. But so I was able to learn how to use computers and learn software, and I would mess around with Flash, and I would do some web development, and a friend showed me FL Studio, and I was able to just make music, and I just became immediately addicted, just pumped it out like crazy, and then just released it for free on certain small private torrent tracker sites and stuff, and like Last.fm was a big platform then, and I had my own site, and that was mostly where I would focus all my energy before even Facebook, and there was MySpace. MySpace was there at the time when I started to really release things. But yeah, I mean, little to no cost. These are free programs that I was using. Like these, all I had to do was just get the cheapest MXL microphone on sale on musiciansfriend.com for like $40. Figure out how to plug it in, and then I can make music, and then do it for forever until every year, and then slowly release it, and then all of a sudden now I'm focusing on it full time and able to see the royalties start to come in and try to understand, like you said, about how confusing it is. Like I spend so much time trying to learn this stuff, and I'm still confused about how many different types of rights there are for one recorded piece of music, and how it can be adapted and packaged and sold again, and all these different things. There's like mechanical rights, there's publishing rights, there's synchronization rights, there's all these different things, and all these different organizations that can collect these things on your behalf. And it seems like it's still just the wild west of craziness. And maybe about this, I would imagine, about the Music Modernization Act.
Mm-hmm.
And how that, I don't know if you talk about it in your book or about how that's going to change. I've talked to some people about it, but essentially there's 2 parts of that or something. One of it is there will be a central database for music. Is that?
If it were to pass, I mean, I'm so excited. I'm so excited to send you my new book, because that's all the stuff I break down. It's like, okay. I don't even have to post that I'm in Milwaukee, and I'll have Milwaukee and Wisconsin musicians reaching out to me like, hey, can we get coffee so I can pick your brain? And I just felt like I was repeating myself over and over and over. So now I've written all that information down, and I'll just be like, here, you can have it for free. I mean, and if you have any questions after that, let me know. But I just felt like you shouldn't have to know me to have access to this information.
Well, it makes sense why it's the Amazon bestseller. Did you self-publish it on Amazon then?
That's like a whole nother podcast.
Okay.
I am with 9 Giant Steps books. I've been really frustrated with the process. I've kind of fired them. I said I'm keeping all the money. My books have made 70% of the revenue at the company, but we'll figure it out. I have a great attorney. The founder was a professor of mine. I do love you dearly, George. I doubt you'll watch this, but he's had a rough year. He's had, he got divorced, and he had some really good things happen professionally. So life arose. But I'm saying, it's interesting because I do want to be open about that at some point, because that's also kind of what the book is about. Take care of your own situation, because you don't know the changes that'll happen. And I think what was frustrating to me about it is there's a few things I would have done differently if it was my publishing company or I was self-releasing. So there was a few things on them flaking that made the process a little more difficult. But same thing happens like if you get signed to a label and the company closes, or your A&R person moves on, or your manager moves on. Anything could happen, right? So it's no different than what the artists are going through who are reading the book.
So would you say that the music industry and all the changes that are happening in the digital sphere and stuff, and the literature or literary industry, I don't know if is it the literary industry?
Yeah.
Yeah. Would you say they're pretty analogous in that sense of like very much these old legacy platforms of publishing and stuff that are holding on to dear life and trying to still control everything? Meanwhile, most people are jumping ship and doing self-publishing with either small or like doing DIY stuff and just focusing more on audiobooks or digital Kindles things. Are they pretty analogous, or are they pretty like totally different?
Really good question. I'll actually credit my publisher and former professor, George, that I was just talking about with this. He's often said that music is the canary in the coal mine for other industries. And I feel that's because our file formats are smaller, right? So we started by trading MP3s, and it's a lot easier to do that with a song than it is with you asked about books, but television show, film, right? So it's interesting because, if I put out a song and I told someone on the street, no one in a million years would ask me what label I'm on, right? Yeah. In book world, everyone asks you who your publisher is. And it's such a weird question. It's like, because you want me to say Random House or something? I mean, I feel like that question I'm getting it a little bit less, but there's still that stigma, which is crazy because I have clients that have released books with major publishers who have where the publisher has done nothing. I've had clients release books with indie publishers where I thought it was a pretty good experience, but the client wasn't always super happy. And then with this, and this is very comparable to music when you're signed to a label. It's like I buy my books for $2 a pop. The client with books on an independent, I was gonna say label, publisher, I think his are 18, and the client not 18, 8. And the client with a major publisher buys hers for 15 or so. So if I ever release a book again, I'm definitely starting a publishing company because then I can just control everything and the margins make a lot more sense. And hopefully by then, by then I don't think I'd care if people ask if I have a publisher, but it's still a question that comes up a lot, and it's not a question that comes up in music.
Yeah, I was very curious because my sister Claire is writing a sci-fi novel, and she's just like, she's been so focused on just creating and building this world, and she's been writing for quite some time, and she was like, I need a publisher, I need to send it to I'm coming from the DIY music industry, and I'm like, I'm just assuming it's all bullshit, and then you need to do it yourself. That's what I'm assuming, but I think I think that's a good point. I'm glad you can throw some insight on that, because it does. I feel like maybe the literary world is a little more slow in cultural shifting as music, because music is pretty, like you said, it's easier to share. There's so much of it. I mean, there's so much literature too, but not as many people read, I think, and it's maybe a smaller demographic, or I don't know, or it's not as sexy, like. It's the book, right? Books, you can. Yeah, we could leave it at that.
Well, but here's how to make it sexy.
Yeah. I mean, if you own your own shit, man, that's sexy as fuck. That's what I think.
For sure. But someone asked me to do a podcast on my first book. And I was like, what a great idea. So I did an Interning 101 podcast, and I'm going to do a podcast on my new book as well. I was hoping to have it out in the fall. But I think I'm going to push it a little bit and probably release it. I haven't really recorded it yet, but work on it later. Work on it after the election.
Yeah, you got some things you're doing.
But that's such a great way to bring a book to life. And I'm so glad someone asked me to do one on my first book, because I don't know if it's something I would have thought of. And now anyone that has a book, I'm like, do a podcast based on your book.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, that's cool. Thanks for that information. Looking forward to reading the book, because I've found a lot of good information just by reading online about publishing for music, and tons of lectures for like CD babies, like conferences and stuff. There's a lot of really good information there. But it is such a burden. Like you're saying, like it feels like it's made to confuse people, and like I mentioned before, like I am still confused, like how this all works. Especially like you have to be an intellectual property lawyer and be like a veteran in the industry to know all these things. Like to that's what it feels like, at least. I'm sure the information is there and is accessible if you know where you're looking and you look and you keep looking. But you have to learn a little bit about law, and you have to learn a little bit about, and just a little bit to survive, to understand how it all works at the very least, or at least, learn how these systems work and how I don't know. For me, I'm still confused, like with a lot of things, but I'm just going with it, man. Like one step at a time. I figure, because I've been doing the DIY full fledged, just like even doing my own touring and stuff. I wasn't able, there was going to be, I was doing East Coast tour that was being booked, and West Coast tour was already booked and all set, but everything was, and I was just starting to do UK, but it was all canceled, obviously. But man, was it a lot of work. It was so much work. Oh my God. Just in Portland, to find another band, I messaged 300 bands, literally 300 bands, which is great that Portland's got an amazing scene. Obviously so much music, but I was like, man, there might have been a better strategy. Like someone mentioned that, like just go, you don't need to go to top tier, what's the word? Top tier markets, or we're not, just to, you don't have to go like hit all the biggest cities ever, because that can actually be, right. It can actually be burdensome and actually hard. It's more competition, and you probably get less money, and there's the more competitive market where you go in the middle of South Dakota, the people are super happy you're there. They'll put you up, they'll pay you well, they'll feed you, all that stuff. It's like, well, that's a nice experience, that seems, it's a contrasting thing. So my strategy was to do a little bit of both, so you can go into the smaller, who can help you recoup some of the losses potentially in the larger cities or cities where they require you to put, deposits down or whatever, or if everyone
for a show, deposit down for a show.
Yeah, it happened to me once. Don't
do that.
I did.
No one should do that.
I know. I did it at one place because I was desperate. I was like, and he was like, yeah, if you want to, you need to cancel, we need to know by the next 2 weeks. I was like, all right. Ugh. It was a small deposit. It wasn't crazy, but like, I hear that. Any pay to play, big alarm bells.
That's right.
Yeah.
Live and learn on that. So a couple of things. You were saying, you have to be, a copyright law attorney or an industry expert to understand all this stuff.
It feels like that.
Well, when people buy the book, direct to consumer, I see who you are. Mm-hmm. The amount of industry people buying this book, including from like massive management companies, is significant. I would say it's almost 50-50. And again, when I talked about my age and being old enough to remember the pre-digital age, that wasn't really the point. I forgot the second half. The second half is that I'm young enough that I am fluent with technology. So I'm generalizing, but most people older than me have had, everybody's had to relearn all this stuff, right? So you'll see in the book, there's definitely, I reference, not naming names, obviously, but there's industry people that don't know this stuff. So anyway, it's all in there. And then as far as finding artists, now you have Chartmetric, right? You can go check out what people are actively listening to where. And then you referenced this before, and this is definitely in my book, but instead of just booking a tour and hoping people show up, looking at your own location metrics and understanding where your fans are and going to them. And then again, you referenced this, but I have a lot of examples of noticing an artist is blowing up in Brazil or Indonesia and, asking the agent to put something together. I mean, Brazil has an awesome music scene, but the example with Indonesia was with Imogen Heap. Her manager, and I tour managed her for a little bit. Her manager noticed that.
Wow, she's amazing.
She is amazing. Jakarta was the #1 country on her Facebook insights, and obviously that's a city. So her manager said to the agent, like, hey, can you check out what's going on in Indonesia? Like, see if there's any offers or shows. And the agent was like, no, there's no music industry there. And the manager's like, can you just check? And she came back with like multiple 6-figure offers. So that's also what I mean. I mean, I love the modern music industry so much because traditionally we wouldn't, in the pre-digital era, we might not have known that information. And now, like I said, we can go to where the fans are instead of the pre-digital era. Artists, from an American perspective, would tour the US, Europe, Asia, Australia, in that order, usually, and then South America if they weren't too burned out. And like I said, now we know where all you people are. So it's much more efficient for touring when we do get back to that.
Yeah, and oftentimes the people that are listening, they're going to be the one, not only are they willing to pony up to see you, they might, they're actually excited for it too. And there's so many different, every country's got different standards of living and different, and different demographics and so. I mean, I would only imagine. I lived in Ireland for a couple of years and like played a couple of mics and stuff, but I wasn't fully ready. I was getting my performance chops up. And one of the big questions, since you have experience with this tour managing and just artist management and stuff, like one of the questions that I've always had, and which I've gotten some answers from stuff, but I hear it from a lot of other people too, is like when to get an agent, when to get a manager, all this stuff. I've heard things of like, you don't choose an agent chooses you, or stuff like that, or like, why you don't get a tour manager unless you've done a tour yourself, or unless you've actually been out there and you have a reason to, because like if a tour manager, that's their job, why would it's more of a risk to just be like, hey man, I want a tour, have you ever toured before? No. Okay, well, like, okay, you must really believe in that person as a manager to like, and be willing to take parts of that risk to do it. So I don't know, what are your thoughts on all that? Like for artists, even artists like myself, would be like, okay, is it even worth to get other people to manage tours, or to manage my to manage me as an artist, or what's that? How does an agent fit in there too? I don't know. Give us something on that.
So that's chapter 12 of the book. Okay. That's the last book. Basically defining an artist industry team. And the reason that is last is because there's so much to do before you get to that, which you do really well from everything I can tell. You summarize the agent stuff pretty well. Agents tend to be, again, I'm generalizing, but kind of more numbers and spreadsheet oriented people, where management is kind of more of a creative, bigger picture and like day-to-day work, not good or bad, just different. I tried to book a tour once. I was awful at it. It's just not really how my brain works. But if you're selling out, 500 tickets in Milwaukee and that's where you're from, an agent's not really going to care. They're looking for regional numbers. They're going to expect you to have a good draw in your hometown, right? Mm-hmm. So they're looking for those regional numbers, national numbers, international numbers. I know a lot of national beloved acts that were getting dropped from their agencies before the pandemic. And now, my goodness, the executives that are being laid off are just, I kind of can't believe it. So yeah, that's why you have to do exactly what you're doing. You need to build up those gig swaps. It's like, okay, set up shows with people in Chicago, Minneapolis, in Iowa, Michigan. I mean, you're actually in a pretty good location for that. So that's the agent stuff. And then the manager thing, again, I think do everything you can as long as possible until you can't. And that's different until it becomes too much, right? And to me, that's different than not wanting to do the work. Now, I interviewed Zoe Keating for the foreword of my book. And, do you know Zoe?
No.
Check her out. You can, she's the only artist I've ever met that doesn't need to read my new book. I joked that we should write the advanced placement version, because she's like, well, you could break the revenue streams down further to get a little more direct. I'm like, they don't even know what publishing is or how to collect on it. Right. So that's the goal of this. And then we'll work on that. So Zoe is a really she defines being a successful DIY artist, but she says, she's like, hey, if there's bits of it that you're pushing off that you just can't deal with, that's when you need to bring something in. So one thing for her, she lands a lot of sync placements. And so she also does scoring, for film and TV and ads and stuff. So she used to get really stressed out because she'd have to be on email all the time, right? Because a lot of times you have to get back to those within a few hours or with 24 hours. She's also a single mom. So having an agent in place to deal with that gets rid of that stress and anxiety of not missing an opportunity. She also has an accountant and has an attorney, but she doesn't have a manager. She does have a booking agent. Anyway, my point, like, I just wanted to offer like that perspective.
Sure.
But as far as the management thing goes, you know, I think oftentimes artists have an idea in their mind of what their manager might be like. Maybe it's Brian Epstein, maybe it's someone on a 50th floor or whatever. And that's one reason at my company, my business partner has a rule. We call it the Melissa rule. When we're talking to an artist, sometimes I'm like, yeah, this is great. Let's do it. And Melissa always asks, have you had management before? And if the answer is yes, that's very appealing to us because we know we're good at what we do. And so they kind of have a point of reference and they understand how this works. If the answer is no, a lot of times there's these like fantasies in the brain that we're just these miracle workers and all these magical things are going to happen, where we view it as a partnership, right? Like we're working together, we set these short and long-term goals, we assemble the team around it, sometimes making changes to that team, and then we go for those goals. So, you know, I really encourage artists not to overlook, I mean, I'm biased, but you know, maybe a super enthusiastic younger person who's also interested in the music business, because that's what I was for the Dresden Dolls and Amanda Palmer. Like, it was really mutually beneficial that they said yes when I asked if they ever needed help with anything. They played at my school, and Amanda's like, "Can you come over tomorrow?" But one thing she told me later is she'd had offers from fans for help, but when I introduced myself, I said, you know, I'm a student here. I'm studying music business. I write for a local music magazine. I intern at WBCN. Let me know if you ever need help with anything. So she said I presented myself in a professional manner instead of just being a fan. I was an Emma fan, but I was on a professional track. And that's a really important differentiator. I think I'm the only person, I mean, that I've seen that talks about sycophants. And if you don't know what a sycophant is, I used to reference the film All About Eve, but now I can reference Bohemian Rhapsody. So I assume you've seen Bohemian Rhapsody.
I have, yes.
Okay. So basically a sycophant is someone who is so obsessed with talent and that's their life that they don't have perspective on anything else. And oftentimes they try to cut out, you know, the professionals around them or even family members because they're so obsessed. And that's not good for the artist's career, because the sycophant, you know, it's hard. It's tough for talent to see, because it's like, wait, someone wants to work on my art and my music 24/7. What's wrong with that? But the sycophant type can become so obsessed that, you know, they're turning down opportunities or are aggressive and short-sighted in the artist's career. So I do think it's important. So my point is, don't overlook, you know, someone who's enthusiastic about working with you, no matter their experience or their local or their age or whatever, if they are also interested in the music business. So yeah, that's what I think. Does that all make sense?
Yeah, I think that's a great point, because there's been fans of my own too that've been like, hey, we want to help and stuff too, because I can do all these things myself. It's like I can, but at some point it's like you have to allocate resources correctly, and you have to, I can't do all of it at once, obviously, but you have to, you know, allocate your time to whatever is a priority until, like you said, I think that's what I've heard as well, is that you should do everything yourself until you can't. And I think that sums it up pretty good. I think, you know, and that's the way I look at it, as like, if there's especially in an industry where everyone's trying to, you know, succeed, and everyone's trying to make money and promote the things that they believe in, try to do all that in one, you know, most people, I think. And yeah, so I think if you have something that has value, then people are going to, like you said, if someone already has the experience, you're in a position where it's like, okay, that's less of a risk, and this other person, there's a lot of less orientation that needs to be going on, and trying to completely demystify, you know, all of what is expected, because expectation is a hell of a drug. And
the best way to describe it is, you know, the whole point of record companies and promotion was to get fans to listen to your music, and now you can go directly to the fans. And I completely understand why it might seem appealing, to get a publicist or get all these other things. Well, I know countless artists that have had the publicists people dream of, the labels people dream of, the managers people dream of, the agents, like the whole assembled team, and nothing happens. So when I talk about my new book, it's like, I taught artist management at NYU in the fall, and I was shocked how many students wanted to get signed or thought that they had to get signed to record and distribute. And I've spoken at every music conference in the world over the past decade, and I'm like, what have we been doing for the past 10 years that you people don't understand that? So my point is, if you want to get signed, you have to do everything in my book. And I'm on panels with major label people all the time being like, yes, everything she is saying is what we are looking for. If you don't care about getting signed, obviously you have to do everything in my book, because then you own everything, and you know how to communicate with your audience, and you know how to grow it. And the point of the book, have a sustainable career. And if you do get signed, even more reason to do everything in my book, because things often fall apart. Listen to what I referenced earlier with my own book's publisher, right? So you need to understand this stuff, and hopefully I've explained it in a clear and straightforward manner, so you do understand it.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think so. It's very insightful. Yes, pivoting back to the iVoting, iVoted. I guess I'm curious as to, you mentioned about this small amount of making a significant change for such a large race in 2016 was a very strange. It's been very strange this whole time, but I think people are more this. I don't know if there's ever going to be a time where people are going to, even though there's coronavirus and all that stuff and the risk of that, I feel like hopefully there are systems in place, and hopefully with this, like how we just saw the election in Kentucky when people were banging on the doors and stuff. It was just like, oh my, there's one polling place in Louisville, I believe that's what it was, where it's just like, what? And that's how it was in Wisconsin too. Like in our election, I was able to get the mail-in ballot and vote ahead of time, and you can go online in Wisconsin, you can get a mail-in ballot and you can send it in, and you can go online and make sure that they received it, because they'll tell you when they got it. And so I was able to go and look and be like, okay, if they didn't get it, I'm going to go and vote in person. But they got it, so I was like, okay, so I'm assuming that it's all good. But you never know. It seems like there's so much mistrust and distrust rather with a lot of these every state, especially with some, there are really, there are worse cases than others. I don't think Wisconsin's got some very controversial and divisive things have been happening, at least over my lifetime, but relatively, non-controversial with like at least counting votes and stuff. Like there hasn't been too many issues, and it's an independent primary usually. So it's like, there's always a lot, no one's really turned down. The voter ID laws are actually, were definitely controversial for sure. But I guess I wondered, like, maybe why the passion for this, for voting and for like, it must be something you believe in dearly, to be volunteering your time for years to make this happen, and using your skills and your awareness and the all the information and knowledge that you've gained, and to try to leverage as much as you can to make these larger cultural changes. So like, what about voting, in general, like that it makes you impassioned to spend all your time doing this?
It makes tangible change. So I love Twitter. I love social media. I love honestly, I love hashtag activism. I love protesting. I love marching. But this is how we make tangible change. So that was really apparent to me in 2016. And that's what we're hyper focused on. And, what you mentioned about your voting experience, not to put you on the spot, but we're going to launch a promotion next week. I think we'll call it something like, what's your hashtag voting plan? Because unfortunately, I do think the writing is on the wall for voting to be kind of a nightmare. And we just had our primary in New York. And I know the primary has been decided, but we had a ton of really important local races. And I ordered so the election was on Tuesday, June 23rd. I ordered my ballot May 13th. When it didn't arrive by the weekend before, actually, even the weekend before that, I thought, I should go vote early. I'll, take care of it. And I was busy that weekend. So the next weekend, so it was the weekend before the election, my ballot had not come. I'm like, I'm going to go vote today on Saturday because I had 3 conference calls on Tuesday. I knew my Tuesday was just crazy. My ballot arrived. I think it did technically arrive around noon on election day. And again, with like 3 calls that afternoon and you have to get it postmarked in time, I would have been running all around. So that's why I took care of it on the weekend. So I'm going to make a video sharing my voting plan, which is ordering the ballot in advance. And if it doesn't come by the weekend before, then I'll go vote early. And of course, for people and fans that don't have early voting, then they can make their plan, their backup plan to vote in person if they're comfortable doing so on election day. For what it's worth, when I voted early on a Saturday, it was empty. It was in an open air gym. I felt super safe. I'm pretty hardcore about stay home and safety and all that anyway. But yeah, so we're gonna ask our confirmed artists, for anyone who's interested, to share what their voting plan is and encourage the fans to do the same. Because we don't want to see any fans like stressed out at 6 p.m. on election night, right? And stressing about the show and voting and all this stuff. So we just want people to put a little thought into what their hashtag voting plan is.
Yeah, that sounds great. I'd definitely do that.
Yay!
I need to set up the plan anyway,
Exactly. But you had it. You kind of just described it.
Yeah. Especially now. I've been embracing the early voting and mail-ins more and more over the last couple of years. I would go. I remember. Yeah, I think it was 2016 or 2018, one of the two. Just lined up. At my university, Marquette University, just lined up like out the door down the street. And it's okay. Like, you get to be with your friends, and you're in college, so you got a little. It's not like every moment is so incredibly important. I'd probably just be back drinking a beer with my roommates or something anyway, so might as well vote. But the early voting has been amazing, because I'll just show up and I'll go with my family. We'll go together, because I'm voting in the district of my I'm voting in the district that is not directly in the city. It's where all my mailing addresses and where everything goes to, and just because it's a little more of a competitive area. Where here in the city, it's like, okay, well, I'm there. I do miss out a little bit on like voting for the mayor or voting for the council member and stuff, but I get to, of course, there are important elections everywhere, especially like you mentioned, local stuff, because I think that's one of the things about the mistrust and the distrust that people have, or the disenfranchising aspects of how people feel about voting, about how it doesn't make a difference, about it doesn't. But you're saying, well, no, this is the only way to make actionable change, and I completely agree. I think the power of the vote has been grossly, it's been misrepresented. I think people feel like it is worthless because there are narratives of like, well, they don't count it anyway, or like, well, what's the point? There's a 2-party system, or what's the, and there's a lot of cynical reasons for people to be disenfranchised. And I think I read some statistic recently about, there's a study about the non-voters, which is like 40% of Americans, and a large majority of them live. Well, I don't know about the large majority. There was a good sizable chunk of that voting block that were living near or in poverty and stuff. So I think there's a huge, that's a huge reason for why people aren't voting. It's like people are just trying to survive. And especially if it's on a Tuesday and they need an ID to go there, and they're not really sure where it is or who's even running or any of this stuff. Like, the civic engagement and the level of civic awareness is really it's terrifying, I think. Like, and I'm guilty just as much of, like, I didn't have civics class growing up. I didn't really know what. I didn't know there was a state assembly until I was like 20 or 21 or something. You
Where'd
know,
you go to high school?
Nicolay High School.
Okay, well, Nicolay,
They
do
might have
better.
civics. They might have civics. I just didn't take it.
Yeah.
I don't know. But you know, there was a lot of valuable. There are a lot of very important, super important things now that I know and been researching and going. But from the perspective of just the, I don't know. I grew up with computer science, and that's what I originally went to school for at Marquette, was computer engineering. And so I studied networks and redundant neural nets and all these different things. And the idea of the internet itself is a decentralized, redundant network where each specific node, like the power of each individual node, it makes up the greater whole of everything. And I think that's how America functions in a lot of ways, because there is these layers of hierarchical stratification of power through government, right? Like you got your neighborhoods, and you got your neighbor, well, you got your like family and your neighbors, then you got your your neighborhood, and then you got your municipalities, and then you got your districts, then you got your municipalities, and then you got your state, and then you got the federal government, and all that, and all that's really important. But I think there is a huge focus. I think partially could be, I'd like to think that, at least I think there is an obfuscation of local politics, and I think people just aren't as engaged. And I think that's even translates into local music and local culture too. Like there are tons of people here in Milwaukee, whatever, 600,000 people. I would love to know the statistic of how many of them know a local musician, and cross-referencing that with how many of them know their like local alderman or alderperson. I wonder.
My mom, I think my mom's friends with the older person, but I hear you.
Yeah, like I think there's just this lack of this lack of localized civic engagement. And I think part of it could be because everyone's moving around all the time, or maybe there is just such a clout about federal elections. Like, I mean, I'm not in New York, so I was watching the election. I was really excited to see a lot of these primary wins, which made me really excited. And I would see some of the down ballot stuff from reporters there, and that makes me excited too. But like, I could only, to see that actionable change, to see it, I think people maybe, hopefully, with all this craziness, if there's ever a time, if there is ever time to just try voting, even if you're like hesitant, I don't think, even if you go there and vote in Mickey Mouse for every single one, like I think everyone, you need to go and do it and exercise it as a ritual, for like at the very least to ritualize it. And I think that's part of what we've lost. Like we maybe never, I don't know if we ever had it, I don't know, but like there is no sacredness to it, I feel like, and that's something that I've at least been approaching it like really a sacred act of affirming your beliefs and participating as a citizen. And like we have this system in place, and a lot of people to vote in this democratic republic, and based on ancient things that have survived, and it's the system that we have. And it seems to, you look through history and you see there are times when there are actionable change, and there are times when shit is nasty, but then things can get turned around, and they don't just happen because some leader comes around and goes, "Hey, everybody, I got all the answers," and everyone's like, "Well, I guess he's got the answers. I guess we can just chill out." Like, that's not how it works ever. That's not how it ever worked. That's not how it ever has worked. That, I think FDR had a great quote where it's like, "You have to make me do these things. Like, I can go up here and say this stuff all day, but you have to make me." And I think he was one of those really, he was able to leverage, the populace, of course, is a huge populist at FDR. But I don't know, like, I think people are just they're disengaged and disenfranchised for many, many reasons, as we were just talking about, just the voter disenfranchisement, not let alone the cultural and national and, local disenfranchisement. But I think with all these marches and stuff, and all this craziness with COVID, and everyone's eyes are wide open. I feel like, not everyone, but more people.
Well, I feel like everyone's is.
Yeah, everyone's like looking. even in Florida, I see like so many people talking like crazy. I just saw this town hall of these people who like I don't agree with what the facts of what they're saying, but they're
not
angry.
facts.
But they're angry, and like you can see their point of view, and you can I always try to empathize with everyone in whatever position they're at, especially if they're just a citizen. They're not some person who's I don't know, and just seeing the anger, it's just people are I think really fed up of things, and I'm hoping that with some of these positive changes, we're starting to see some changes and starting to see some real. I mean, it's been 24 days now. People have been marching in Milwaukee, like straight, and there's people who are like, we're gonna beat the record, and like we're going for 201 days at least, and other people are like, we're gonna go and we're not gonna stop until all our demands are met. And I mean, I hope that's true, because like to me, I think that's like such a, and participating in these marches too myself, like like being like, yeah, like this is our city, like this is our, like we are this community. If no one's who's gonna stand up? Like when someone gets hurt, your neighbor gets hurt, are you just gonna wait for someone to do something, or are you gonna do it yourself? Or some people are able to. If you're a medic, go help your neighbor, whatever. Or if you're if you understand the artist and music industry, get some artists and some people to get people to vote. Make it sexy and cool. I think that's great. So can you explain just a little bit about the process of iVoted again, like about how people can participate?
Definitely. Before I do that, I want to comment on a few things.
Sure.
We're never going to tell you who to vote for, but don't vote for Mickey Mouse. So I do want to say that. And, when talking about these local elections, I think if there was ever a time to appreciate our state and local governments, it's been under this pandemic, right? Mm-hmm. When it first hit, a lot of people said to me, "Oh, did you go back to Wisconsin?" I'm like, no, because I've been through disasters here in New York, and we have really strong local government. So that's why I want to be here. No, I'm not leaving. Mm-hmm. I've been through Hurricane Sandy. I've been through the blackout. And now we have the lowest rates in the country. I mean, obviously it was crazy here a few months ago. So that stuff really matters. And then here in Williamsburg and Brooklyn, where I live, I mean, you reference this, but the primary races are just fascinating. I mean, there's one, our state assembly person has represented us forever, maybe for 40 years or something. And there's a woman about my age, and it's a dead heat. It's totally tied, and they have to count all the absentee ballots. And she's ran before and got crushed. So that's a huge difference. Right. And then for our representative in Congress, again, we have someone who's in their 70s and has been around forever. And right now, the difference in votes between her and an upstart person is like 605 was the last I checked. And the capacity of the Music Hall of Williamsburg is 650. So again, that's kind of where my brain goes. And then just to touch, I mean, thank you for what you said about, okay, music industry person, like doing something. That's totally how I feel. Like, this is what I know how to do. So I'm doing it. Just like, when we started to work on this for 2020, unfortunately, I know there's still crazy things happening at the border. But I was reading about parents and stay-at-home parents creating a chain of cars to get kids to their family. So it's like, okay, I can drive you from Texas to wherever, and then this person will drive you to. That's what those people can do. This is what I can do, and we can all do something. So to answer your question, fans, okay, so our website is ivotedconcerts.com. And we'll have all the artists listed alphabetically, their set time, and each artist will have, it'll either be linked or we'll make it really clear what to click on to RSVP. And to RSVP, you submit a selfie at home with your mail-in ballot or a selfie from outside of your polling place. And if you're not 18 by November 3rd, you can RSVP with a video letting us know what election you will be 18 for and why you're excited to vote. And then if you're not from the United States, you can RSVP anyway. So that's the plan for November 3rd. We're hoping to have the RSVP systems open around the time that early voting opens in each state. So off the top of my head, I think Pennsylvania is the earliest one on our list. I think their early voting starts like September 14th. So I'd love to have, at least that RSVP up. But yeah, so that's the plan.
I think that sounds great. Yeah, that's cool that it's open to everyone too. I think.
Well, it has to be,
Yeah.
Because that's what makes it legal. As the word gets out on what we're doing again, there will be people that are like, that's illegal because you can't give something to someone to vote,
right.
or things like that. And you have to make it open to everyone. So the example that I give, I've never seen anybody, we haven't seen anybody get in trouble for this, but the example I give is Starbucks one year wanted to do free small coffees for everyone with an iVoted sticker. And actually I should back up because I initially wanted entry into the Pfizer Forum or Bradley Center with iVoted sticker. And if you want to learn about iVoted stickers, I'm your person. First, not every precinct can afford them and others run out. So that wouldn't work anyway. And then there's the legality issue. So back to Starbucks. Starbucks was going to do free small coffees to everyone on election day with an iVoted sticker, and they got tapped on the shoulder legally. So they just changed the promotion so it could be open to everyone, and they said free small coffees for everyone on election day. So our promotion is actually very similar. Anyone can take a photo at home with a mail-in ballot. We're just hoping you take the step to mail it in. Anyone can take a photo outside of a school or a church or wherever your polling place is. We're just hoping you walk into the door and actually vote. Right. So our promotion is technically open to anyone. We just hope you take that extra little step. And I just love that everyone is getting behind voting. Everyone is, pushing it, sharing it, promoting it. And I was meeting with the woman who ran Rock the Vote for a long time. And I should research this history, but she told me that, election day, there's different election days, obviously, but, the national one is in the fall because the farmers would bring their harvest into town and they would make voting a big celebration. So on one hand, I know that, national election nights are really crazy, but that's what I'm hoping this will be too. And which reminds me, when you're talking about, people not really taking voting seriously, it's a really important right. Women, people of color did not have it for a super long time, right? So it's a really, really sacred thing. I don't want to live in a dictatorship and not have a voice and just be told what to do. So that's why this is all really, really important.
Yeah, in the streets of Athens, women weren't allowed, it's been there for a while. And I've been learning about, though, the Persians before that, and that was quite different. I think the Persian Empire, there's a lot of female admirals and politicians, and slavery was outlawed and all that jazz. Really interesting history. I've just been diving into that stuff, but just how history changes. I think maybe, hopefully we're going in. I think we are going in that direction. It seems undeniable, at least to my end. But
Nicolay did something right, although maybe you discovered that on your own.
The Persians, yeah. It's something that I discovered. I'm a huge fan of Emerson, and he talked about, when I was reading it, he's studied Persian thing because he's just obsessed with poets and all their culture. And I've been reading more now through Thus Spoke Zarathustra, the Nietzsche book that he wrote about Zarathustra, also known as Zoroaster, which many people know as Zoroasterism. But he and Nietzsche and Jung and Hegel and all these European romantics, as well as the American, quintessential American novelists and poets and all that stuff, all look to ancient Persia, and so there's something there. So I've been dipping my toes in there and trying to figure out. But actually, I think in America, the top 10 most popular published poets, I think there's a huge chunk of them that are just that are Persian poets from all different times of Persian history. For example, everyone might have heard of Rumi. He's the more popular one. But anyway, yeah, I like what you're saying about it being a celebration, and that's what I've seen and I've heard from other folks in other countries, is that Election Day is a holiday, and it's really, and I know that there are at least the federal election day, it's on the same day, right? For all the states. I don't understand how that's not a holiday. At least a soft holiday, I don't know, at least something whereas, you could look at I think Australia will actually penalize you through taxes or something if you don't vote, stuff like that. There are so many different aspects of ways we can invigorate and we can reform and we can move the voting to be represent the magnitude of what you're describing about how it is a right that has been fought for thousands of years, to just at least participate in some election. And we see it doesn't make huge changes. You get one person, the right person in office, the right thing who can be the domino to affect, and obviously it's the people who get them in there and the people that hold them accountable through their votes. So yeah, I mentioned about the Mickey Mouse before. I was using that as a example. So if you don't ever vote, that's better than not voting. But I think at least you're there and you're participating. Who you vote for is your decision. But I got really intrigued by voting rights and all this stuff, or at least like the modern or like a contemporary movement towards voting rights. I'm a huge fan of Lawrence Lessig. You mentioned about like law professors and stuff in the industry and intellectual property, all that stuff. Lawrence Lessig and the Creative Commons has been one of the most important philosophical and cultural imprints in me that have, I release all my music under Creative Commons and have love it, the open source economics and all that stuff. And he ran, I don't know if I forget what they called it, like a one-issue presidency candidate. He ran in 2016? It must have been. Where he ran as a Democrat on that platform. Didn't get any, obviously, even people see like Andrew Yang, some sort of outsider type guy. He got a lot more success than Lawrence Lessig for sure.
Right.
But Lawrence Lessig's platform of voting rights, like his whole thing was like, I'm going to be elected. I'm just going to pass this thing. And then the VP is going to be the person, which is that's a whole sell. That's like very very hard to do, very confusing, very strange. But then the strategy the efficacy of that strategy is debatable. But the voting rights, the whole point of why he was writing, trying to just draw awareness to that aspect. I remember looking it up and just being blown away at like what it could, what we can do to help voting be easier, be a celebration in a way where people are excited to do it, people want to do it, and they know that it makes a change. And I mentioned about the two-party system, and I know that in Maine, and now in Alaska, they're voting for ranked choice voting, which I think I'm definitely excited about these states exploring it, because it's one of the main things that I think a lot of people get turned off with the stagnation of this false dilemma constantly of this party or that party. And it's like, but like 40% of Americans are independent. And they don't even want to vote. They don't even want to. They don't even want to. Well, the 40% don't even want to vote, but 40% also don't want to pledge allegiance to a party, right? Like, especially now, like maybe if there's a party that they could stand by, they would, And I think that's what a lot of people feel, myself included. And being in Wisconsin, able to be an independent, just through and through, and that's how I was taught as a kid by my dad. I was like, who do you vote for, Dad? And he's just like, well, you look at the candidates, and whichever one is the best, you vote for that one. I'm like, oh, that makes sense. And then I remember saying something in high school to someone, and they were like, oh, I was like, oh, I'm not really a fan of that politician. And they're like, oh, so then you must be insert the other party here. And I was like, what? I was blown away. I was like, oh, and then that got me to understand the tribalism and the divisiveness of that, of like when you have these two identities that are constantly fighting. So I'm very encouraged and excited by a lot of reforms and a lot of things, and this year in particular, with all of this craziness and all of this trauma and struggle and pain, and I think these are the opportunities for transformative change, both inwardly, like as individuals, but also as a society. So I'm a huge sport. I'm super glad that you reached out to this. I'm super glad you put this on. Major props to your team and you and this whole iVoted initiative. I'm really excited. Do I have to do a selfie too, even though I'm performing?
Sure, why not? Encourage.
I get it.
Set the example for your fans.
Yeah, got to. Yeah.
Yeah, so a couple of things in what you said there. Again, I just want to reiterate, like, I run a company, so I control my own schedule, and voting on Tuesdays is still a pain, right? So there's just so much. I've seen this on The Daily Show a long time ago when Jon Stewart was still hosting, but when you're talking about other countries, I also think in Australia, they have like a super short election season. I feel like it was like 6 weeks or 3 months or something.
England and Ireland and everywhere.
So then we don't have, and also then that gets into campaign finance and things like that. But it's just like, no one wants to like hear about this for so long. We also manage Olympic swimmers. And so I was at the Olympics in Rio in 2016. And it was such a gift. I mean, in a lot of ways, but for 10 days, I do love Hillary, but I haven't heard about like Hillary, or I don't like saying his name, or, like, because it was so nasty, and it was so nasty that summer. And I'm like, I have this 10-day break where I'm totally, plugged into this other thing. So yeah, I think shortening the election season, first, it would help us, I think, choose more relevant candidates sometimes, right? Because people were running for president before there was a pandemic, and now, maybe people want Andrew Cuomo to run or whatever. I'm not saying that or whatever, but it's like, we just live in this totally, different time now. And then just to like chill our nervous system a little bit, because it gets so nasty and it's so intense. So I really like that Australia does that, if I'm right about that their election season is super short, and ours is like 2 years long for president.
It's definitely not 2 years. I mean, it's 4 years really. I mean, like,
right.
But 2 years solidly after the midterms, then it's like, okay, go. And so much money. Oh my God. And that was the major thing with Lawrence Lessig, who I highly recommend everyone just watch any lecture by Lawrence Lessig, and it just doesn't matter what it is. Like, it's truly, like, when I've discovered some of the stuff, and he's not the first person to come up with these solutions and stuff, but just to know that there are the solutions there, and then like discovering more and more, like, there are solutions to all these problems, and so how do we get this done? Okay, well, we're gonna have to bite the bullet and make it and actually go and try to make sure everyone gets to vote. And I think people are talking about even these. They're hoping that these leaders of these marches here in Milwaukee are like, we're going to be voting, or we're going to be marching until November, and we're going to be marching with everybody to the voting booth and all the stuff. We're going to get the caravans, like all the young kids especially in these impoverished neighborhoods, like going to get all the grandmas together. We're going to ship them, like everyone coming together, like you said, doing a caravan. If like no one's going to solve the problems in your community unless, if you're not engaged. Like, I feel like that's a lot of the issues with, like, you were mentioning about hacktivism, hashtag activism and stuff. Is it's good for awareness, but awareness is only one part of activism.
Right.
And structural and systemic change, like, is, to me, from an engineering standpoint too, like, I've like that, and that's why I'm so attracted to a lot of these concepts of like real. I'm almost even hesitate to even say reform anymore. Like, I feel like reform is almost a word that we should not use anymore, because it's like we've tried reforms for forever and they're all just dog whistles or watered down or all this stuff where it's like, okay, we'll reform, we'll cut around the edges, and that's a reform. Whereas, like, I think everyone's ready for some transformative change, and so we're in this opportunity to do it. And this election every election is important, but especially with the response of the federal government during this crisis. It's really it's affecting people more and more deeply. When we're talking about how many. I don't even know the insane number of how many people applied for unemployment and stuff, like, and the unemployment
millions and millions and millions.
It's everyone's got a little skin in the game now. I think a little more, and I think that was a lot of I remember watching the Occupy movement as it was happening, like right when citizen journalists were able to live stream like really, really well, and I was able to watch these things on the ground, what was happening in New York, and there was some Occupy stuff here in Milwaukee, but it wasn't like New York, because obviously Wall Street's right there. And I was able to see these talk about how the internet and about how industries are shifting and changing. You're able to directly see what other people are seeing, directly communicate with what other people are communicating. Oh, I see in the chat, over 40 million. That's what someone says in the chat, over 40 million.
Oh, yay. Thanks, chat person.
Great. But I was able to see like what was happening on the ground and like hear from the activists on the ground. I never got that anywhere on CNN or MSNBC or anything. No one was saying and like empowering what these people are doing. I think now we have a lot more tools at our disposal. You're talking about the democratization of sound and the democratization of music. And, I was mentioning about the roles of musicians, and, that's something that I take very seriously about, using the power of music and these incredible, physiological and spiritual experiences and phenomenon that happen when people are participating or experiencing music. And I think it's so incredible to see we're globally at this level too, where everyone's able to especially in American elections, like everyone has got skin in the game. Everyone's got skin in the game, like globally. We're talking about globally, like people, things go crazy, and I get messages from my friends from overseas, and they're all just like, they're so interested. And
we have a Canadian on iVoted's board. She's one of the most passionate people about American politics that I've ever met.
Yeah, they don't want to talk about their own. I went in Canada, in Montreal recently at some couch surfing, and I was like, so what's going on with the election? They're like, oh yeah, but okay, so what's going on with Hillary's campaign and Elizabeth Warren, all this stuff? They're all asking me. I'm like, yeah, but how does your healthcare work? Like, right. We need some of that.
Legal, here. How's the legal weed going?
Yeah, I think I just saw something about Wendell Potter is a kind of infamous guy who was promoting a lot of these misinformation about Canadian healthcare system with some of these think tanks and stuff, and then he recently is now reformed or something, or maybe he's just seeing the writing on the wall and changing. Who knows? For whatever it is, these those types of things are indicators that there are some shifts that are happening. Someone who has been adamantly against universal healthcare or socialized medicine or any type of organization that can give people healthcare, but now is a Medicare for All activist and advocate and all this stuff, which is like, wow. Oh, cool. And like apologizing for all the things that they've done and all this stuff. It's like, you might be just trying to save your career, but you're doing the right thing. So I'll give you.
I would guess something happened in that person's life.
COVID.
And it really
that's what they said.
Or that, yeah.
COVID. That's what at least. That's what he said. It's like, wow. Imagine if everyone could. Like I've talked to my sister who's living in Texas, and I've talked to a lot of people here in Milwaukee and friends and stuff, and everyone's concerned about COVID, of course, but one of the first things that people say is, I don't want to go to the doctor because I can't afford that shit. Like, I can't afford to go get a test. They say it's free, but they've been saying this shit is, that the insurance is going to cover this, insurance is going to cover this, for my whole life. And then yet when you go, you get a bill every time, and half the time it's like wrong, and you got to fight them, you got to call them and all this stuff. So voting makes a big difference to this stuff. So we just need some goddamn healthcare in this country, man. But and that's what voting does that, and it can happen at a state level, it can happen at local levels. I was just watched this documentary on PBS. Being Wisconsin, you might find it interesting, about Milwaukee's socialist mayors. About what's his name, the Hone Bridge, and Frank Ziedler, and this other guy, I forget what his name was, but they were doing 40-hour work weeks and like workman's comp and stuff at a Milwaukee level, like at the municipal level, before the state or federal people instituted anything. So it's like you have people have the resources to be able to do things at their low, and when those work at local levels, they spread, right? Like it spreads because people see it. Other mayors are paying attention. Other the word gets around that these things work. And if the people in positions of status quo or power don't stop that from spreading, it the cat's out of the bag with a lot of that stuff. And I think, I don't know, it's it's interesting. It is there's a lot of, I forget which who said it, but it was something like the thing that gives me the most hope is how bad things are, because there's so much room for improvement.
Yes.
And that's
there's
very optimistic
for that. I mean, we are nonpartisan, bipartisan, and our sister organizations in the music industry are the same, like Headcount. I'm good friends with, I don't know if I'll say good friends, but I've known Andy Bernstein, who's the executive director of Headcount, for a long time. And they've registered over 500,000 fans to vote over the past decade or so at shows. And they have a phenomenal board. And I guess after Obama was elected, someone on their board was like, so are we done now? And, basically Andy was really highlighting to me, it's not that what we are doing now isn't work or hard, because it totally is. But it's a lot easier now, right? We confirmed 80 artists in like 2 weeks. That's insane. So people are saying yes now, but it's just a reminder, if there are people in office that you feel really good about, that's actually the time to work harder, because that's when you have to get, people to pay attention. Yes. And by the way, I know you were saying hashtag activism, but I like how you said hacktivism, and
that's a different thing. So. That's a different thing. That's very fascinating to me as well.
That's my Persian history study.
Hacktivism.
I mean, not like I'm an expert, but I like looking, reading about it.
Yeah, I love. There's something very. I don't know. It feels like a thrilling thing when I think about hacktivism. Even though I'm sure a lot of it is not very thrilling, but
sure.
But like Julian Assange and all that stuff, I'm a huge fan of, like WikiLeaks and Edward Snowden, and a lot of these decentralized, I forget what they're called or how they're like the cells of Occupy was like that, Black Lives Matter is like that, where it's like this decentralized, no leaderless movement, where it's like leaderless in the sense of there's no centralized, it's central stratification of like marching orders or anything, like, okay, this is what you do, or here are today's talking points, or whatever. It's really up to the people and the local people to do it. Anyone can sign up on Twitter and say they're anonymous and post things, and then all of a sudden they'll be anonymous. And if they just so happen to get something, they can send it out. But there was just I think they just leaked something about a bunch of police departments recently. But yeah, I mean, that's a whole other thing. But I agree. Like there are so many avenues for exercising our rights, whether it's First Amendment for speaking out or assembling, or even Wisconsin, the Second Amendment rights to be going out, concealed carry or open carry, just walking around exercising your rights. These are your rights. You got to use them. It's scary for a lot of people, myself included, seeing a lot of people carrying guns around. But if that's the law, and that's something. It's something that people are participating in, like, I don't know. There's a lot of interesting things that I've been hearing about that, not to get too sidetracked with that, but about how cops might be less likely to tear gas you or send rubber bullets if half the people in your protest have guns.
Right.
And that's a very scary and stark reality.
It is.
But there's some truth to that. Like, I mean, we see the history of the Black Panthers and other militia groups, for other causes and everything throughout history. But yeah, very, very important stuff. I'm very glad to be part of it. Like I said, we're just about an hour and a half here.
Okay. Well, the last thing or one thing I want to say is just, it has been such a blast. Well, first, it's been really fascinating seeing what different people are listening to where. What people listen to in Milwaukee is so different from Madison, is so different from Grand Rapids, is so different from Detroit. So that's just fascinating. And then we're just having a blast on the iVoted team with music discovery. Like, I love your music. And again, it's so cool to like tap into what people are actually listening to. It's like, there's plenty of artists I could get to do this, right? And I'm not trying to diss things that have happened in the past, but that's how everybody's done it, right? Like, let's get, Jay-Z and Springsteen and all these people. And we want to get all those people. We have a strategy and we're building towards it. But it was like, I know a lot of the artists' names, from our Wisconsin data set from being there, right? Like I said to the Milwaukee Journal, I'm like, obviously nothing replaces Summerfest, but I'm used to seeing these names on a Summerfest bill. And even last night, I was looking at artists that wrote back from Pittsburgh. He's like, I hope I'm not like offending, but like indie folk emo, and has all these super young, passionate fans in Pittsburgh, right? Yeah. And then I saw another response from an artist, and I was like, in Philly, and I was like, oh, that name is so familiar. Who is that? And then I remember I had an intern that I think the intern is co-managing the artist now, who was so passionate about this Philly artist, right? So it's so cool to see. Wow. Just these artists kind of coming to life in their communities, in their states, where it really counts and makes a difference.
Yeah, and that's that whole strategy of that redundant network, right? Like you got all these people who have their own communities, and all together that might actually be more powerful than just one big name or something, where people might not, they're not as invested. It's far off. It's like a big celebrity status, right? Where it's like local celebrity musician status is different. It's like they're still tangible. You go up and say, hey, and you can chat and you can talk, and it's not, it's not some insane out of body experience. So instead of like meeting, Paul McCartney or something, or just be like, what?
And we'll get there. And there's a lot of big, national artists responding, but they tend to be, generally speaking, the more insecure ones, right? Well, who are the headliners? Who else is doing it? But we have, we have some that we'll be announcing soon, and I'm really excited. And then once the dominoes fall on that, then it just goes nuts. But you are a bit of an outlier from Milwaukee. I would say, generally speaking, Milwaukee is a lot of rap, jam bands, and oh my goodness, do we love 90s alternative on YouTube. I'm like texting my high school friends. I'm like,
that's a bit
Chumbawamba, Jewel, Collective Soul. Just a lot of artists I haven't necessarily thought about since I was in high school. And then Madison, they are so hip.
Yeah, they're cutting edge.
Yes, for sure. But it's like, I discovered someone like Boom Forest, who's from Baraboo. I'm like, oh my gosh, the Sonny and Cher cover, it's so beautiful. And then when we shifted over to Grand Rapids, which is where my mom's from, it is all Christian contemporary music. Wow. And that's not a genre I know all that
Grand
much
Rapids,
about.
Really?
But when you look at it, it looks like an indie band or an emo band or hip hop or whatever. And that's the contemporary portion. It's just super fascinating what people are listening to, where and how different it is.
Yeah, and I wonder how with every platform and all the different ways people consume it, and the different swings of novelty and fashion and stuff, like how things. I'm a huge data nerd myself, so like I'm fascinated with this stuff and be like how it moves over time, anthropologically, right? Whatever that
I know what you mean.
The over history, right? Like, and how that has changed. And I that summary of Milwaukee is pretty accurate. Yeah, like the huge rap scene here for sure. Jam scene. There is maybe Milwaukee as not as strongly, but in Wisconsin in general, huge bluegrass scene. But especially jam grass.
Yeah.
That's the shit. That's like, I've been to huge shows for local artists that are really, really good people that are just packed, and everyone is, it's a straight hootenanny, and it's super fun. It's super fun. It's super fun music, super accessible, super awesome. And it's a little bit of roots oriented, which people like that novelty and stuff. Yeah. The jam bands are real. I mean, you've probably met some Wooks, or were you a Wook? Do you know?
I was not, but I was schooled at a jam band management company. It's not necessarily like my type of music, but the business models are brilliant, and it's what I've built my career on. So I've always built businesses around an artist, and taking care of the fans is a very close second. I mentioned I worked at Madison House out of college, and so this was before I was in college, but in the early 2000s, and now a lot of people do this, but in the early 2000s, all around String Cheese Incident, they built a record label, a merch company, in-house PR, and in-house travel agency, both for artists and fans, for destination stuff. Wow. Pretty much the entire artist ecosystem was in-house, which again, it is pretty common now, but was very ahead of their time then. So, and also jam band people, I mean, I'm generalizing, are very nice. I've always had
Super
really
nice.
positive experiences
yeah.
at shows and festivals and stuff like that.
It feels like a religion sometimes. You know what I mean?
But
In a
is
good
it
way.
all of this,
It's a
right?
community.
Like,
Yeah, no,
it,
and that's the closest I've felt, and I think maybe it's because of the Dead, obviously, like are like
yes,
the
yes.
they're the pinnacle, they're the formula that everyone's been using, and yeah, and I didn't mean the religion in a pejorative sense, because
I know.
I feel the same way about music in general. It brings people together, and I think that's the idea about the sacred, what I was talking about before, about like I grew up in a Catholic family. My grandparents were very devout. My parents weren't as devout, but it was an important part of their understanding. So I went to a Catholic grade school, and we went to church like twice a week for like 8 years.
Wow.
Man, it was brutal. Because I'd never felt a sense of sacred connection to the place I was in, to the understanding, to the right. Like some of the stories are sweet and awesome, and I understand the myth, and I understand like the power in that, and like what this means, and all that stuff, and how it can be useful to living a better life. But when it came to the community gatherings, I didn't feel. Maybe it was just because I was a kid, and I just felt it. Automatically. It was just a reaction. But when I don't know, I feel like with so many people are missing maybe some of that, especially with like the disconnect that people feel already. When they can come together in music, it's like a very, very like refreshing and powerful connection where people can come and vibe on these same ideas and same concepts. And it's like I know a lot of people that go to these festivals like it's a spiritual quest. Like they're going there to experience other dimensions, and this, and whether it's assisted by psychedelic drugs or not, which is notorious for some of these jam bands for sure.
Sure.
But like, I don't know. I think that's a huge part, and so leveraging that type of mentality and that understanding and that responsibility, might as well turn it towards some other social actionable change, right?
You know what though? Like in this time where we don't have festivals and concerts, I was watching the live feed outside the White House when the protests were like really, really insane. And it reminded me of like a set break at Bonnaroo. I'm like, this is the exact same vibe.
Wow.
It's a bunch of people hanging out, like maybe playing a guitar or singing or doing their thing. And it's almost like, I mean, they're there for a reason, but it's almost like we definitely miss that experience.
I feel that a lot with these marches here in Milwaukee, because they're, some of them are very, very serious, very like clearly directed and focused and intentional for specific things that aren't really jubilant or festive concepts and ideas. But some of these marches I've been on have a more festive, like celebratory nature, and I feel like because Milwaukee, when the winter's over, man, like this is summer, like we're supposed to be out, like this is what we're like, we have to go out, or like this is our only time. This is all we got, man. And so like when there's no festivals that are happening, it's like, okay, well, especially with COVID and everything, it feels like some of the only places that people can go to gather are these marches, which is really interesting. It's a really, really, really interesting, like kind of a perfect storm for a lot of different things. So we'll ride that storm and hopefully shelter ourselves when necessary against it. But yeah, very super awesome talking to you, Emily.
You too. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I really, really appreciate you coming on, and we're able to do all this and chat, and super looking forward to seeing all the different artists that are going to come out as well. Yeah, people can go to, you mentioned before, it's in the links. Links are in the description if this is on YouTube or on Facebook, or if you're listening on Spotify or whatever. It's, what is it, iVotedconcerts.com? Is that right?
You got it. Exactly.
Nailed it. Yeah, iVotedconcerts.com. I think you can sign up right now for a mailing list, I believe.
Yes. Yeah, and then we'll let you know as soon as the RSVP links are available. And in the future, we want to expand this to NBA games. We've also talked to some music managers. I was talking to the Charlotte Hornets before all this, and I feel like once we get one NBA team, then it'll just spread. But even in our pandemic world, I was talking to a music manager who represents some of the biggest live gamers, and they were like, "Can we ask our gamers?" And I'm like, "Yes." So iVoted is not limited to music. I mean, that's who I am, and that's my core. But it's comedy. It's really anything anybody wants to do.
That sounds like a great coalition right there.
Thanks.
I appreciate it. Yeah, thanks again. We're signing off. We'll cue the music, and then I can say goodbye. But yeah, thanks everyone for tuning in. We'll share this stuff later, and I'm sure we'll have a lot more information. I'll be posting about it, posting videos, posting selfies about voting and all that, and more information. So everyone stay tuned for that. Appreciate it again, Emily.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, bye-bye now.